All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the Dallas Cowboys just left the field at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara knowing that their season is officially over, but they also know that they were so close to victory. The Cowboys fell to the San Francisco 49ers 19-12 in the divisional round as they were plagued by the things that have hurt them all year long. Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott led the NFL in interceptions this season, in spite of the fact that he missed 5 games. And of course, we saw Dak play as good as he possibly could this past Monday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But to me, I think that was fool's gold for him as well as this entire team. You look at it, the Bucks were not a good litmus test as far as gauging where the Cowboys are. The Bucks have been a bad team all season long, and the Cowboys just feasted on that. Go back to the regular season finale for Dak and these Dallas Cowboys, and he looked terrible against the Washington Commanders. And that was once again the case today with the 49ers defense that only sacked him once, but they harassed him throughout the game. And you go back to the first quarter, bad throw by Dak gets picked off. Luckily, the defense bailed him out and was able to limit San Francisco to just a field goal. And then, of course, later in the first half, San Francisco is inside the red zone. Pardon me, Dallas is inside of the red zone. Looks like they're about to score a touchdown, which would give them a huge boost of momentum. And then, of course, Dak throws that other pick. So these are things right here. So many costly interceptions throughout the year for Dak, and they once again hurt him today, especially that second one, because it took points off the board. You at least had an opportunity at three, maybe. But nonetheless, if you're the Cowboys, those things hurt you. Overall, Dak Prescott was 23 of 37 passing today for 206 with a touchdown and those two picks. And it's one of those where Dak once again did not play good in a key moment. And he's now 2-4 in the postseason. So you look at this team as a whole. 7 accepted penalties against the Cowboys for 50 yards. Brett Maher missed another extra point. This is when Dallas, right after Dallas, scored their only touchdown of the game. And of course, we know about what happened with Brett Maher last week. He missed 4 extra points against the Tampa Bay Bucks, and he just got bailed out by the fact that the Cowboys played so good in that contest. But nonetheless, that was not the case today. And of course, another missed extra point. It changed the philosophy for the Cowboys on offense at times. However, Mike McCarthy did stick with him, and he did come back and make 2 field goals in this contest later on. But, speaking of Mike McCarthy, his inability to manage the clock and just take over the reins in those key situations. You go back uh, to late in the fourth quarter. Dallas is deep in their own territory. Excuse me. It's a scenario where they have the football, they have their timeouts, and there just wasn't a sense of urgency. And even before that, okay, when San Francisco was stopped by Dallas, why not call a timeout in order to preserve some time for your team? Because at that point, you're still on the north side of the 3 minute mark. If you're Dallas, you stop them, you call a timeout, you have more time to work with. And then for my money, there wasn't a sense of urgency with Dallas on that drive as well. They get stopped, and then they took their sweet time in punting, and by the time the 49ers got the ball, it was 2:05. They only had to run one play prior to the 2 minute warning, which was a Purdy to George Kittle pass, which resulted in a first down. But nonetheless, if I'm Dallas, you got to go for it in that scenario. I mean, yeah, your defense has been playing good. Yeah, your defense has kept you in the game. But nonetheless, I know that you're deep in your own territory. But at that point, it's win or go home. If you don't make it, fine. You go out guns blazing. But in this scenario, Dallas did not do that. And then, of course, on Dallas's final drive, this game really should have been over before it was. You think about Elijah Mitchell's inability to stay in bounds on that third down toss play, which would have, given San Francisco the opportunity to salt the clock away. And even then, when Dallas got the ball back deep in their own territory on the first play of that drive, Eric Armstead, if he wasn't worried about letting up on Dak because he thought Dak was going to throw the ball, Dak gets tackled in the end zone for a safety. You think about the two gaffes on that drive by tight end Dalton Schultz. First and foremost, catching the ball, not getting out of bounds, and being that the officials gave him forward progress, that meant that the clock continued to run. And then on the final gaff by Dalton Schultz, catching the football, but having the inability to put both feet in bounds as he just leisurely caught the ball. And that hurt the Cowboys because if he catches that ball, Dallas has somewhat of a shot in order for the Hail Mary. And of course, we saw that last play, which was basically a trick play, out of a college, playbook. You basically got all your offensive linemen lined up deep. And you have Ezekiel Elliott, as your center. And of course, being that he's a center, that makes him ineligible for the play. And of course, he was your best running back at that point. Now that Tony Pollard was out of the game, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But nonetheless, once again, Mike McCarthy was out coached by Niners head coach Kyle Shanahan, just like he was last year in the wild card round when these two teams met. And then you go back several years when Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons when Mike McCarthy was still the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. And these two met in the NFC Championship game. And Kyle Shanahan's offense just had a field day with Mike McCarthy's team that day. But talking about the injury to Tony Pollard, that really changed things for this Cowboy offense. I know Mike McCarthy at halftime tried to downplay it, but nonetheless, Tony Pollard is Dallas's feature back. Zeke gets paid the most money, yes, but he is no longer a feature back. He does not have that explosiveness and elusiveness like he did 5 or 6 years ago. And you look at it, that changed what the Cowboys could and could not do offensively because you look at Dallas in the second half and they just had those two field goals. That was it. So you look at this Cowboys defense. They were on point in the first half. You have to like the way that Leighton Vander Esch and Demarcus Lawrence were able to fly to the football and they were able to limit this 49ers offense. But I give credit to Kyle Shanahan. He always does this as far as sticking with the game plan. And the game plan offensively for the 49ers is to run the football first. San Francisco loves to out physical you. It's the body blows through it's like a heavyweight boxing match. It's the body blows that continue to add up, and eventually those body blows will take place. And we saw that in the second half, especially in the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter. The 49ers offensively began to win the battle at the line of scrimmage. More holes for their running backs. And of course, it was a bevy of things with Elijah Mitchell as well as Christian McCaffrey. But nonetheless, that running game got going and then it opened things up in the passing game. And we saw George Kittle, who only had 5 catches, high impact catches, and then, of course, 95 yards, big time catches for George Kittle. Big time players make big time plays in those situations. And the 49ers were able to not really run away, but they began to dictate things as they were able to go on and get this victory today. The Cowboys win over the Bucks. Like I said, it was fool's gold. And I said this not podcast wise, but it's the same old song for the Dallas Cowboys. They'll win a playoff game. The media will go crazy because it's the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, they're America's team. Dallas this, Dallas that. And at the end of the day, they're not good enough to get past the second round of the playoffs because that is typically when you run into the more elite teams. Most notably for this version of the Dallas Cowboys. They have talent, yes, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You have talent at receiver with CD Lamb. Again, Tony Pollard is the better option for them running the football. But the Cowboys right now are hindered by the indecisiveness of their head coach, Mike McCarthy, and the inconsistency of their quarterback, Dak Prescott. And that will continue to limit this team. I mean, Dak, he's okay. He's not a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. And again, that showed once again today against the 49ers, just like it did last year in the wild card game against San Francisco, and just like it has so many times in the past. It's the typical Cowboys. This is what they do to you. And some people, drank the Kool Aid after Monday night's win over Tampa Bay. I was not one of those people. The Cowboys had enough to stay in the game with the 49ers, but at the end of the day, they just could not get over that hump. And again, look at their quarterback and look at their head coach. I didn't listen to the post-game presser with Cowboys team owner slash team president and general manager Jerry Jones. And of course, and I've said this for years, it's a telling sign when your team owner, gets more press coverage than the people on the field and the head coach. That is never a good thing. And that is something that is continued to plague this Dallas Cowboys franchise. And again, this is a big reason, a part of the reason why we're going on nearly 30 years since Dallas has not won a Super Bowl championship. So the 49ers simply had too many weapons for, you know, the Cowboys to stop. And TFX, what's going on, my man? I got plenty to talk about, and I'm sure, you've been you watched that game, with a bird's eye, kind of like I did. And you said you just watched the presser, and Jerry kept saying that he was sick. And at the end of the day, Jerry Jones is a proud man, but and he wants to win. And I'm going to take this back a little bit with this, and it's something I've talked about, obviously not on here, but I'm going to bring it up now. The Dallas Cowboys, as a franchise, have never been the same since their success nearly 30 years ago. And the reason is this: we saw the Cowboys get a king's ransom, okay, for that Herschel Walker trade, and that really laid the groundwork for them, if you will, to go out there and have the success that they did in the early 90s. You're never going to see that again. Of course, we saw the issues with Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones. And it was unfortunate for that franchise because that Cowboys team was set up to win a lot more than they did in the 1990s. It's never been close to that again because Jerry has to consistently get top billing, and he can be sick all he wants. He was sick 15 years ago when he thought he had it in the bag, and he put tickets for the NFC Championship game on the seats of every single player heading into the locker room for that game. New York Giants got word of that, and of course, they went on and upset the Cowboys that year en route to winning the Super Bowl. We've seen Dallas, of course, the catch that wasn't a catch a couple of years ago with Des Bryant against the Packers. So many different scenarios, throughout the years. But at the end of the day, even if Dallas had found a way to win this game right now, I don't think that they have what it takes to go into Philadelphia and beat that Eagles team. So nonetheless, Jerry can be sick, but he's going to be sick all the way back to the ranch because this is going to be another head scratcher for him and his organization. So you ask what's next for the Cowboys. Well, they're probably going to tweak things and tinker with things. I think first and foremost, to me, they made a mistake today having Brett Maher as their kicker. I know he made 2 field goals. He was having issues in the pregame. He was having issues all week as well, leading up to this contest. This is something where, okay, if this is week 5 in the regular season, fine, you can get away with it. But there's too many things on the line right here. It's win or go home. I know they brought in kickers, the Cowboys did throughout the week, to try to like see if somebody else could potentially, get the job, or just maybe just trying to push Brett Maher. But nonetheless, there was too much on the line right there. They're definitely going to try to tinker with things. They more than likely might lose their defensive coordinator Dan Quinn to a head coaching spot, so that's going to hurt this defense. But then also, you're stuck with Mike McCarthy because I think Mike McCarthy is one of those guys. He did just enough to keep his job, and of course, contractually, they're obligated to Dak Prescott with all of that money. So it's going to be the same old song and dance for the Dallas Cowboys heading into next season. And on the flip side, for the San Francisco 49ers, it's on to Philadelphia against the Eagles. for the NFC Championship game. Mike Shanahan continues to get it done as a play caller for this team. I'm not going to call Brock Purdy a rookie anymore because he's got enough reps at this point that I'm not going to call him a seasoned vet either. But nonetheless, he's done a tremendous job so far at this stage of the game, just relying on the people around him. He knows that this is a talented group of players at the skill positions. And then on top of that, he's played within the system. He's not tried to do too much. He was 19 of 29 passing today, no touchdowns, but most importantly, no interceptions. And that's the big thing. San Francisco did have the one turnover on the muff punt by Ray McLeod, but their defense stepped up. That was another golden opportunity for this Cowboys offense to get a touchdown, but the Niners defense shut that down and limited them to a field goal, which was made by Brett Maher. But for the Niners, you ask, what are their chances next week against the Philadelphia Eagles? I think the Niners have a legitimate shot. I'm not going to go in right now and check off the box and say San Francisco is going to win that game. But I will say this defensively, the Niners are going to have their hands full because offensively, this is going to be the best offense that San Francisco has faced throughout this tournament right here, due to the fact that the Eagles are another team that are stacked at the skill positions. We saw their ability to run the football last night against the New York Giants. So I think what San Francisco is going to have to do, they're going to have to try to put themselves or put that Eagles offense in passing scenarios, in second and long and third and long scenarios, and make Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts beat you from the pocket with his arm. We saw him have the ability to take off at times last night against the Giants, but he was still a little hesitant, especially coming back from that shoulder injury. And he really still can't afford to take a good lick right now at this point. But nonetheless, San Francisco is going to have their opportunities. They got to execute better offensively as well. It's going to be easier said than done with that Eagles defense, especially with the pressure that they can create up front with the likes of Fletcher Cox. And this is going to be probably the most hostile environment that Brock Purdy has gone in as a quarterback in the NFL so far. But at the end of the day, getting back to the Dallas Cowboys, they're going to make some adjustments in the offseason. But again, like I said, it's going to be the same old song and dance. This team is just good enough to make the postseason. They're good enough to possibly win a playoff game. But at the end of the day, that's as far as the Cowboys are going to get. It's basically, they have their supporters throughout the country, but at the end of the day, those supporters are just going on a fool's errand thinking this team is going to win. It was the same old Cowboys, the things that have plagued them all year long, the penalties in key situations, the interceptions by Dak Prescott, and the inability to make quality key decisions in key moments by Mike McCarthy once again showed up. And that is a big reason why Dallas is heading back home, knowing that their season is over and it's time for them to empty out their lockers and look forward to next year. BT, I'm not sure how you pronounce your last name, so I'm just going to stick it with BT. Please forgive me on that, but you're saying run game is very important this year in the playoffs. And, I talked about it earlier when I was talking about the Bengals with their ability to go on the road and knock off the Buffalo Bills. And I talked about this when I did my game picks earlier this weekend. It's a scenario where this time of the year, you got to run the football. You got to play D. You have to limit your turnovers on offense, and you have to go out there and create turnovers defensively, not just create turnovers, but capitalize on those. And Dallas's inability to run the football hurt them after Tony Pollard went out. San Francisco's ability to consistently run the football due to their offensive line definitely helped them. Dallas's inability to capitalize on that one San Francisco turnover was big because we saw Dallas's defense keep them in the game off of those two interceptions from Dak Prescott. Could have been game breakers. If Dak was close to throwing a couple of more interceptions in that game. If that was the case, this game might not have been as close as it was. But you got to take care of the football, and you got to protect yourself in these scenarios. And again, Dak Prescott led the NFL in interceptions this year, and the man missed 5 games. Just let that sink in for a minute. That's another reason why this team is on their way home. Again, what you do bad or cannot do always shows up at the most inopportune time. And that was once again the case for the Dallas Cowboys. And it's back to the drawing board for them while San Francisco can ice up and get ready for a cross country flight to the city of brotherly love next Sunday evening for the NFC Championship game. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. I was unable to get to it to talk about the Jags Chiefs game as well as the Giants Eagles game. I definitely will be discussing those tomorrow night. So if you like this page on YouTube and sign up for the notifications, you'll definitely get the alerts when those are ready. Zigzag crazy. How about them Cowboys? And who knew many years ago that when Jimmy Johnson basically coined that phrase in the locker room, the visitors' locker room at Candlestick Park after the NFC Championship game, that it would now turn into something that this franchise or this team rather consistently gets mocked by. But that's the case. I've said it before on this podcast, and I'll say it one more time. Dak Prescott, he gets paid like an elite quarterback, but Dak Prescott is not elite. And at this point in the game, at this point of the season, if you don't have that guy at the most key position on the football field, it makes it very tough for you to win. You look at Joe Burrow with what he did today for the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow knows how to elevate his game. You look at Patrick Mahomes as he gutted it out last night for the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes knows how to elevate his game. That's what the greats do. You look at guys like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. Well, maybe Aaron Rodgers in the regular season, maybe not Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, but definitely Peyton Manning, guys like that. They know how to elevate their game. They know how to elevate those around them. Dak cannot do that. He's a good quarterback, but he's not a guy who's going to elevate his game as well as the people around him at the end of the day. You're saying zigzag. You weren't expecting much from the Cowboys. They got way hype after beating the Bucks, but the offense flopped against a real Super Bowl contending team. I said it earlier about it. It was fool's gold as far as the win over the Bucks. The Bucks are not a good team. They got into the playoffs with a losing record, and at the end of the day, Bill Parcells said it best: "You are what you are." And Tampa Bay's inefficiencies showed up against a better Dallas Cowboy team. And if you look at the Dallas Cowboys in the last couple of years, they're good enough to beat the bad teams or the so-so teams. But when they get on the field against the elite teams, that is when they struggle, and that showed up once again today. Dallas is very fortunate that they only lost by 7. They could have lost by double digits very easily, but at the end of the day, it's still a loss, and they're going to go back to the drawing board and try to fix this thing. But I got a feeling that a year from now, we're probably going to be in the same spot, having the same conversation about the Dallas Cowboys, having the same conversation about Jerry Jones, Mike McCarthy, and Dak Prescott. And when it's all said and done, they're good enough to make the playoffs. They have the name of the Dallas Cowboys. That's all well and good. It's kind of like the Yankees in baseball. And granted, the Yankees have won a lot, just not recently either. But nonetheless, it's the name that they bring to the table and nothing else. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up on this one. Once again, thanks for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. Please feel free to like this podcast, subscribe to this channel. Like I said, get the notifications. I'm going to be talking about the Jags and Chiefs tomorrow, as well as Giants, Eagles, and giving a recap, in my opinion, on those games. As always, zigzag. Oh, I didn't know this. You're an Eagles fan. You're definitely excited to see them play. Listen, I'll tell you like this: the Eagles are a very intriguing team because I'm looking at the Eagles and I'm looking at the 49ers, And this is why I like this game next week because arguably the two most complete teams in football right now. And you look at it, the Eagles had a very quick rebuild. And I think, just they've just done a good job on both sides of the ball as far as stockpiling the athletes and athletes at multiple positions. Their pass rush can come after you in waves. They have talent in that secondary. We know what they can do running the football. Uh, the AJ Brown deal was a steal, getting him from the Titans. And of course, we know that because it led to the Titans GM getting fired. The Eagles, they're getting a little older on the offensive line. I expect them to address that in the offseason. But nonetheless, they're still solid up there. And we know about the 49ers on the offensive line. We know how they can run the football. We know how they can rush the passer. We know about their talent at the skill position as well as what they have defensively as well. So I think this is going to be a tremendous game. I think we're in store for two darn good games next Sunday. Chiefs, Bengals, and then of course Eagles, Niners. I think those are going to be good games. Both of those games right there are good enough to be the Super Bowl. Okay, and honestly, it's one of those where, like at this point, I know Mahomes is injured, but it would not surprise me to see either one of these four teams hoist a trophy at the end of the year. And we talk about parity in the NFL, this, that, and the third. That's fine, but you look at it. Three of the four teams that were in the conference championship games last year are still standing. Okay. The only difference was the Eagles are there on the NFC side as opposed to the Los Angeles Rams. But it goes back to the teams who can run the football, who can rush the passer, and who have quarterbacks not only that don't make mistakes, but know how to get it done. That's what it all comes down to. This is why these teams are here. And because of that, I think we're going to be in store for two tremendous games next Sunday, both in Philly and both in Kansas City. But nonetheless, if you're a football fan, sit back and watch and enjoy. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks once again for the support. Thanks for chiming in. And like I said, hate to sound like a broken record, shameless plug, but definitely check me out tomorrow to talk tomorrow evening to talk Chiefs Jags as well as Giants Eagles. So, folks, once again, this is William Martin signing off and saying thanks again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.